Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to learn more about rental income and and basically why isn't your rental income a passive activity. So David Tilney is joining us today as a guest. We're excited to have him, and I'll bring him on in just a few moments, and he's going to share tips and tricks of basically the way that he handles his business. And just so that everybody knows, in case you're not familiar, David does teach a ton of classes. We'll share his contact information and you'll be able to look at his website for any upcoming classes that he has. And he does do a landlording class that's 3 days. So we'll talk to him about that as well. My name is Larissa Green. I'm with Advanta IRA. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Just a couple of things that I wanted to make everybody aware of. I do keep everybody muted on the webinar. It just makes for a nice clean recording. That way people can go back and review it later. But we do take questions. So we're going to take questions throughout the webinar. Type your questions into the chat box. I will be monitoring those. I also want to let everybody know that the slides are added as a handout. So if you want the slides, look at the handout section and you will be able to download the handout as a PDF. So that is there for you. Again, this will be recorded and we will share the recording with all of you as soon as it is ready. It takes about a day. You'll get it to your email so that link can be shared or reviewed, whatever you guys would like. Again, my name is Larissa Green. I'm with Advanta IRA. I've been with Advanta for 10 years now. My contact information is up here, and I am just going to very quickly give you some information on Advanta because I know everybody has joined me really not to hear about Advanta IRA today, but more to speak with David Tilney. So we'll get going right away here. So Advanta IRA is a self-directed IRA administrator. That means that we hold private investments for you within an IRA account. We actually don't sell any investments at all. All of the investments are your own. Your strategy is your own as long as it's within IRS rules. What we do instead is hold the account for you. You find the investment and we help you get it done in the name of the retirement account so that your account can maintain its tax deferred or tax-free status. So basically, it is an investment of the IRA. I think I get that question all of the time. How long do I have to borrow the money? You're really not borrowing the money at all. It's just an asset or an investment of the IRA, just like your stocks, bonds, and mutual funds would be. We've been in business for almost 20 years and we have 2 offices. We're here in the Tampa Bay area of Florida, which is where I'm based out of. And we're also in Atlanta, Georgia, but we can actually help anybody anywhere as long as they have a US-based retirement account. We have, I have to update this slide, but we have around 1.8 billion in assets under management. We have close to 8,500 clients. And like I said, as long as your retirement account is US-based, we can help anyone. So we've really grown a lot in the last several years, and over the coming years, we plan on growing more. And we also offer a lot of education. So what we hope sets us apart from our competitors is our educational platform. We always have webinars going on every week. They're always no cost, no obligation, and we also provide a level of customer service that differs from our competitors. Everybody receives an account manager with our system, and that person is your one point of contact for anything that you need. Just a quick disclaimer, although we do talk a lot about the rules and strategies allowed within a self-directed IRA, what we don't do is give investment, legal, or tax advice. So if you have those questions, please feel free to ask them, and then I might direct you to a third-party professional that can assist you with those questions if I cannot answer them. So that's just really important. You want to make sure when you're making an investment that you're doing all of your own due diligence and that you're comfortable with the investment and those parties involved in the investment as well. If you haven't heard of self-directed IRAs, just very simply, the reason is probably because brokerage firms aren't going to be willing to hold private investments, and there's not a lot of companies out there like Advanta willing to hold these. So we're really not competing with your brokerage firm. We're just filling the gap in the industry where we're going to hold private investments versus publicly traded assets. And so what we're doing is just holding that portion of your portfolio that you would like to self-direct. The main reason people self-direct, well, we have 3 really, but just based on talking to people, the people that move money over, They basically did not know that they could do this, okay? Using your knowledge to invest in what you know best is probably the biggest conversation that I have with people. I had no idea. I like to invest in real estate. I like to lend money. I like to invest in gold and silver bars and coins. I had no idea that I could do that with my retirement account. So basically, it's a new source of capital to them to make those investments that they know best. A lot of times it's stock market fatigue. So, the market goes up and down. And a lot of times people are investing in tangible assets where, the fluctuation in value is not going to be as high or low. And there's always something there that they can see, touch, feel, maybe drive by if it's a piece of real estate, and they feel secure in those investments. And then, of course, the tax benefits. Again, it's tax deferred or tax free, depending on the type of account that you have. And so those are the three main reasons that we see people self-directing their account. Just very quickly, I always like to point out the types of accounts that can be self-directed. And the reason behind this is because a lot of people that I meet are under the impression that it has to be a Roth IRA in order to self-direct it. I'm not really sure where that comes from. But the truth is, if it ends in IRA, it can be self-directed. Any former employer plan can be self-directed. We also have education savings accounts and health savings accounts up here. And the reason for that is because self-directing those is exactly the same as self-directing an IRA as far as the rules, having contribution limits, et cetera. So we can hold those accounts as well. And something I always like to point out is the reason we put emphasis on former employer plan is because it's always the case that you can move a former employer plan to self-direct it. But if you're currently employed and you're still participating in that plan, the chances are going to go down that the plan administrator and the plan itself will allow what we call an in-service distribution or in-service rollover to an IRA in order to self-direct. I always encourage people to check with their employer plan because you just never know. But that's sort of the way the rules work for that, in case you were wondering. If you guys have questions on any of these types of accounts, including something like a solo 401k, please let me know. And like I said, we have webinars every week and we talk about these types of accounts. We talk about the rules for investing. We talk about investment strategies, things like checkbook control of your IRA, private lending, investing in private equities. So we always have something going on where we're talking strategy. And just to give you guys an idea very quickly of the investments that we see with a self-directed IRA, I have a short list up here, and I always like to emphasize that it is a short list because instead of giving us a list of things you can invest in, what the IRS has done instead is given us a list of things that you can't invest in. So the only two asset classes you cannot invest in with a self-directed IRA is going to be life insurance and then collectibles, and that's it. And then there are people considered disqualified from dealing with your IRA. It's basically people up and down your lineal tree. I won't go into that today, but I do have webinars that talk more specifically about those rules that you can join us for. But basically outside of that, the sky's the limit. So understanding the rules, very important for your IRA. Once you have that down, you can look at investments that will work within your strategy. But for real estate, we see a lot of long-term rentals, just buy and hold. Very typical strategy for an IRA. We occasionally see short-term rentals and rehab projects. We do see real estate really in any form, so condos, mobile homes, mobile home parks, tax deed, real estate investment trusts, syndications and private placements. It could be commercial property or multifamily. But anyway, I just really wanted to give you guys an idea of what we're seeing as far as real estate goes. And I also did mention things like private lending. We see real estate options. And so we see some joint venturing in IRAs, and we talk about that stuff in our real estate webinar. And if you guys are curious, I have recordings of those webinars. You can always send me an email, let me know, and I'll make sure to get those over to you. Again, my name is Larissa Green, and in just a minute, I'm going to bring David on. Two quick reminders. One, you can get the handout in the handout portion of the webinar. So if you go to your control panel and look at the handouts, you'll see those slides are there for you. And also just a reminder, you can type your questions into the chat box and we will be taking questions throughout. So with that, I want to introduce David Tilney. He is joining us. And I have some information for you here and also his website and contact information. I mentioned he has a lot of great classes. He's teaching all of the time. And so David, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great, Larissa. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. And when is your next class?
You know, I'm the world's worst at knowing. I should have those dates right in front of me. We are doing a online class in September. I believe it's the last weekend in September. It's a
Okay.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The exact dates are on my website, but
Okay.
I can't. It's terrible, but I'm sorry, I don't know the exact dates. I can look it up
Okay.
though.
I have it here for you, David. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, September 24th through the 26th. The website is listed there, and the topic of this class will be hassle-free property management and master leasing. So basically, we're just getting sort of a taste of that upcoming class in today's webinar.
Great. Should I start off, Larissa?
Yeah, go right ahead, David.
Very good. Well, first of all, let me just tell you why I titled the topic today, if rental income is passive, why isn't your landlord activity? I mean, the IRS claims that rental income is passive income by definition. It doesn't mean you don't need to use a snub-nosed 38 to collect it, but it is deemed passive. The issue really is that I find most landlords or people who are thinking about being landlords really like the idea of rental property and owning rental property, but they're scared to death of tenants and toilets. Larissa, I don't know why, but I'm having a problem of changing the slides again. Let me,
There you go.
there we go. Okay, so I find that many folks don't either don't take the plunge, or they do take the plunge and they invest and they have horrific results. They have the tenants from hell. They have all of the various problems that come up with that. And so I really want to spend some time today to help people to think about working on their business, not just in their business, and how you can make uh, owning and operating rental property truly passive. Because my wife and I really enjoy what we do. We do find it's passive. We find we can do the things we want to do. So let me just go through here and cover a few things. The first, I think I went too far. Yeah, I wanted to give you a story. Charlie Carruthers, who's no longer with us, owned a whole bunch of houses. My understanding is he owned over 1,000 houses in the Newport News, Virginia area. And he and a mutual friend, Jack Miller, who was one of my main mentors, took a trip to Europe. And Jack told me that in the middle of the trip, one of Charlie's properties burned down, and Charlie had to leave and go home early. That doesn't sound like financial freedom to me. That sounds like his business owned him. And I think the key is you really got to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. What are you trying to accomplish? And then make everything work to meet your needs. Now, the why part, I think Simon Sinek says it better than anyone else. And he has some wonderful YouTube videos, and you might want to check him out. He's the guy, he wrote a book, Start With Why. And what he really says is pretty much everyone can tell you what they do. Some people can tell you how they do what they do, but very, very few can tell you why they do what they do. And I think it's the why that's the most important. I mean, Charlie got so wrapped up in acquiring more properties, but did he accomplish his goal of I don't know exactly what his goal was, but I do know what my goal is. And my goal is I wanted financial freedom, which meant I could work with whom I wanted, if I wanted, when I wanted. And that certainly didn't mean owning 1,000 houses. Um, you really got to spend time on how to accomplish this and enjoy the journey as you strive to reach that goal. A little bit of my history. I started in 1978. I failed into management. I had no interest in managing my properties. We'd hired 3 or 4 different companies, and they all fell flat on their face. Uh, but one of the big things that changed, I started managing mine. I took on other properties to cover my overhead, and we were running, at our high water mark, we were certainly over 100 houses that we were running. And after a long-time employee retired at age 65, I decided less was more. And I wanted to figure out how to make most of my gross income become my net income, and how to reduce. it was tough enough for me to figure out what to do with my time. I really didn't want any more employees. So my solution was really to share expectations with my applicants, tenants, and vendor upfront to create systems for every procedure that I had to do more than one time. And I think that's crucial. I mean, management of your tenants is both a science and an art, meaning you do need people skills. The business of real estate is a business of people. But you also need systems. And I'm here to tell you that if you have wonderful people skills and you don't have the systems in place, you will go stark raving mad. If you have zero people skills and you have good systems, the systems will give you the time to develop the people skills. So I think that's kind of what I want to look at today. Passive property management. You know, everyone's got to create their own systems for their business, but my hope is by sharing some of our systems, you'll start thinking about changes you can implement to make your business more passive. We don't show properties. We don't do property inspections. We try not to talk to applicants before receiving rental applications. And we oftentimes have our tenants contact vendors directly when they have a problem. So let me dive into that just a little bit. Why don't we talk to any applicants prior to receiving applications? Our whole deal is what we view putting a tenant in a house as hiring an employee to do a job, and the tenant is the employee. And if you're an owner of a business, you don't want to accept the minimally qualified employee to put in your business. You want the best of the best. You want best qualified, not first come, first serve. And so part of our process is that in order to protect ourselves from a potential fair housing complaint, we want to be able to say that we had a blind test. We had no idea whatsoever who was calling on our properties, looking at our properties, or doing anything else. And by having systems to do that, which we'll go through here in a minute, you'll see how that kind of works. So that was absolutely intentional, that we won't talk to anyone until we receive applications. That way we can have 5 applications side by side and have the best of the best rise to the top. Tenants are our greatest assets, not the properties. We really do believe that. Let's face it, a bunch of you, I'm sure, have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Robert Kiyosaki makes the point that assets pay you, liabilities eat you. Well, how many of you find that vacant houses feed you? They don't. They eat you alive. There's all kinds of costs involved. You need to, it's the tenants that feed you, and so you got to understand they're your assets, not your properties. And if you'll change your mindset against your tenants, I think you'll find wonderful things will happen down the road for you. We analyzed all of our turnovers last month, in fact, over the last 10 years. And we discovered, for years I've been telling people that I thought that 90% of the time we went from a tenant to a tenant with zero downtime. Well, after analyzing all of the 10-year time period for our properties, we actually found that less than 1% vacancy during that 10-year period. And then if I took out 4 properties that we took offline when we rehabbed, we actually had less than 1/10%. Now that's very, very helpful, because I think you'd find that most landlords, first of all, they'd show you that tenants move out the end of the month and new folks move in the beginning of the month, typically. Well, if they have to take their property offline to make their properties ready for the next tenant, they don't lose 2 or 3 days. Generally speaking, they might lose an entire month. So I think that it really behooves you to figure out a system how you can go from a tenant to a tenant with no turnover. How do we do that? Well, the first thing I would say is that any necessary maintenance and repairs and capital improvements are largely made while our properties are occupied. And if a tenant gives us notice that they're going to be moving, the very first thing we ask is, well, what do we need to do to make the place spiffed and shiny and get it squared away? And our tenants are really on our team. They are motivated to show our property and to help us find the best qualified applicants. Now, COVID-19 changed things slightly for us, but it actually gave us new tools to be able to accomplish this task. in prior times, tenants would have, what would I say? They'd have open houses, let's say Tuesday evening between 5 and 7, or Saturday morning 10 to 12, and people would come and look at the property, and they would hand out applications. And that's how they would show the properties. And they might do one or two one-offs for someone that needed to see it at a different time. The first thing we would do is we would send them a move out packet, which showed them how to go through the process and how to protect themselves during the process from any potential violent deed or some such thing. But during COVID, when less people wanted folks in their houses, in their homes, we started having our tenants do some video walkthroughs. If someone called and wanted to see the property, our tenant would say, sure, let me give you a call back on some video platform on my telephone, on my smartphone, and I'll walk you through the house, answer any questions, go out in the backyard, turn 360 degrees around, and just, cover anything you want me to cover. And that really does work well for us. I prefer the in-person. Why? Well, the in-person, our tenants can actually see their car. They can see how they interact with their kids. There's some other information that our tenants can discover. And believe it or not, if you have a good rapport with your tenants will clue you in as to what they see and what their thoughts are, as to who might be good stewards of your assets. In terms of them moving out and the next person moving in.
Hey, David, I had a question pop up on maintenance during occupancy. Are you looking at doing, some sort of inspection, or do you rely on the tenant to let you know if there's some sort of maintenance that needs to be done to avoid downtime on the move out?
Yeah, really good question. We're unusual, no doubt. I mean, we really shake people down before they move in, but once they move in, we don't do inspections. I actually live 8 months in Naples, Florida, and 4 months in Colorado Springs. All of our properties are in Colorado Springs, and the reason for that is that's where we raised our family. That's where all of our networks are, and that's where we really want to own our property. So we don't do inspections. I feel that if you hire the right person and move them into the house, share expectations as to what their job description is, and I'll share that with you if you'd like. But then don't do bed checks on them. Trust them. Maintaining trust between your tenants and you, that's really a difficult thing to acquire. And the best way I know how to gain your tenants' trust is to trust them first. Now, we do an awful lot in screening for our tenants. We check 5-year landlord history. And if they've only been in one place for 5 years, I want to know where they were the time before that. 5 years employment history. There's lots of stuff we really go through. Credit is the very first thing we check, and credit. I'm really looking at FICO scores, and why I like FICO scores. FICO scores not only tell me people's ability to pay their bills, but much more importantly, their willingness to pay their bills. And we're looking for someone who's going to move into our house and make it a home. We really are looking for someone who's going to be a good steward of the asset. Our job description for our tenants is, number one, that they maintain and improve the house and grounds. That's the most important thing we're looking for. Number two, obviously, we want them to pay the rent on time. And if they don't want to do that, they don't want to rent from us because we're too tough. Number three, we want them to get along with the neighbors. Number four, we really want them, I look them in the eye and I say, I want you to stay at least until you die, and hopefully until your kids die. And we chuckle about that because they probably don't want to stay quite that long, but it lets them know we're in the long-term business. And lastly, we want to let them know that we want them to use us for support when needed, but if they can solve the problem and move forward. So our tenants, we give them a lot of latitude, but we find our tenants are really exemplary people, and they do a great job. Hopefully that answered the question, or at least partially.
Yes, thank you. I had
Yeah.
another question pop up. Um, how do you get tenants to agree on managing the property? And I think that sort of goes back to what you just discussed, but is there in your lease agreement or in your discussion in your interview, is there, outside of just saying these are what the expectations are, do you give them examples maybe of, past experiences with tenants and, well, if you have this kind of thing happen, this is how a tenant has handled it in the past. Maybe you could give us some insight on that.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that people have asked me many times is how can you, and how do you figure that the tenants are working for you? They're paying you, you're not paying them. I am paying them. I'm paying them. The currency I'm using is good housing. And so I point that out. Now, on each of our advertisements, when we advertise a property online, at the bottom of the ad, we have this following paragraph, and I'll just read it to you because it's not in the notes there. It says, Keeper Corporation believes that our tenants are our greatest assets. We've rented to hundreds of tenants since 1978. We offer well-maintained houses for long-term occupancy to people who wish to take our houses and make them their homes. Our typical tenants rent for multiple years. Our longest tenancy was just under 25 years, and we've never had a tenant forced to move because of a foreclosure. The actual rent for this property is $100 higher than the advertised rent. However, landlord agrees to accept the advertised rent amount from any applicant who is willing and able to take on the responsibility of maintaining the house and grounds and to pay the first $75 of any repairs or maintenance needed in any given month. If what we offer appeals to you and you meet our qualifying criteria listed below, we invite you to apply to rent this property. So we take the approach up front that we want to put a tremendous number of people in a funnel, and the funnel is they see our property, they like what they see. Then we want them to either have a virtual showing or an in-person showing, and we give out lots of applications. And our application packet is 9 or 10 pages long, and they'll read this stuff, and we want them to self-weed themselves out very quickly at that point. Number one, we want a lot of them to say, this guy's too tough for us. The questions he's asking, we're probably not qualified. And we don't want to waste our time. We don't want to pay an application fee and then move on. That's what we want. We don't take the scattergun approach. We take the rifle approach that we're going for a specific type of individual. And then they read on the ad, they read that. And then I'll follow up and I'll give you our qualifying criteria. It says income should be 3 to 4 times the monthly rent. And then I've got in brackets, or 3 to 4 times the applicant's portion of rent if participating in a public housing assistance program. Generally, 700 plus FICO credit scores is the second item. Third item is stable employment and income or retired. And the fourth one is positive rental history and or mortgage payment history. Note you must meet at least 3 or 4 of the criteria listed above in order to be approved to rent this property. I'll also tell you at 3 different places in our application, we point out that we do not accept individuals on a first come, first served basis. We accept them on a best qualified basis. And again, part of doing that is to let folks know that if they are not best qualified, if they know that they have a problem, we don't want to take their money to process an application if it's for naught, and we don't want to waste their time or our time. We want them to move on and go rent from potentially one of our competitors. Hopefully that makes sense. Any more
Yeah,
questions?
it does. Yeah, we had a few more.
Okay,
Someone wants to know if you always do annual rent increases and how do you figure the amount that you're going to increase the rent?
great question. I have to say, typically we always do annual rent increases. Why do I say that? Because last year we did not. All of our rental contracts come due either the end of June or the end of July or of some year. And we reset all of our rents in May prior to that time. And last year is one of the only times in our history that we did not raise rents. We contacted each of our tenants. Actually, I called each one of them up and I said, we just want you to know we care. If you have a problem, we have a problem. And we were referring to COVID-19, obviously. And we said that, this year we've made a corporate decision that we are not going to raise any rents across the board. And I furthermore said that, we do believe in the power of prayer. And if you have a problem, we'd sure like to hear about it. All of our tenants are current on our rents. We received all of our rents before the first of the month, every month. I take it out of their bank accounts. They do not send it or create the transaction. I do. I use ACH, which is Automatic Clearinghouse. We had one tenant who had a problem with COVID-19 for a 2-month period last year. And he called me up and he said, for the first time in, I think it was 35 years, he said he was going to have to ask his dad for a loan. And his dad was a retired physician. And at the time he told me this, he said, the market was not up that particular month. And he said, I don't know if my dad's going to be able to help. And he contacted me later and said, no, he's not. And I said, well, just tell me what I need to do. Should I take no money out of your bank account, some money out of your bank account, or all the rent? And I think it was April of last year. And he said, well, we actually have all the rent for this month, but if you take it, we'll have nothing left. And I said, just tell me what I need to do. And he said, well, if you could take half, that would be great. And then as soon as the government check comes in, it has your name on it. And my response was, no, it doesn't. I said, I think this is going to be a long period of time, and you need to hold on to that and see how that works out. We had to do that for 2 months. I believe it was April or May of last year. But he went out, and he lost his income stream through no fault of his. The government put him out of work. He was a screenwriter for Hollywood, and Hollywood shut down. So he went out and he got a temporary job. He was very embarrassed because I pushed him to tell me what he was doing. And he got a job working for Miracle-Gro. That plant, I don't know exactly how it works, but it's potting soil or something. And I don't know what he did for him. But he was able to square away his rent and move forward. And we offered him a new contract. He did fine with it, never missed a beat. And we've recently got a new contract for this year. So that's, so there's two answers. First of all, yes, we raise rents every year. And since I'm in the house business, even if the market is going down, we tend to raise rents, maybe a very little amount. And if someone moves out, we may find we have to lower the rents back down to what the current market is. But that's kind of how we do it. Are there exceptions? Yes, this last year was an exception. We did not raise any rents.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, we had somebody ask, do you get a lot of pushback on the model that you use for the, for example, the long application packet and sort of putting the information up front of what expectations are? Do you have pushback on that?
If we do, we probably don't get the application. And from my standpoint, I look at it that I just dodged a bullet and I didn't hire the wrong guy to move into my property. So I like that. I mean, if people, I can honestly tell you that when people sign a contract with us, they generally stand up, look me in the eye, shake my hand and say, this is the best contract we've ever signed, because they know exactly where they stand. And people like to be given responsibility. Most of these folks are adults. They all are adults and they have skill sets. And when folks take the position of, here's a 2-page rental contract, sign here, press hard, last copy's yours, move into the house, sit in a chair, face the wall, and don't touch anything. And if you do anything wrong, here's how we're going to beat you up. That is my thoughts of how traditional landlords treat their tenants in many cases. We don't do that. We say, you're an adult. You've got a great skill set. We hired you because we know what that is. And on our application, we ask them things about their skill set. We ask them what tools they own. We ask them all kinds of things. But when they move in, we say, we want you to take the house and make it a home. And as long as you're improving it, we're on your team. But don't do anything dramatic without getting us to approve it up front in advance. And we don't want you to do anything that's going to hurt yourself, hurt the property, or hurt someone else. And people really like that. They like to be given responsibility, and they'll save you a lot of money. I've got all kinds of examples. And I mean, the most dramatic example I ever had with a tenant is I had a tenant build a 350 square foot addition on the end of one of our houses and put a second bathroom in with tub, shower, double sink, skylight, wood parquet flooring, oak trim, and all the frills. And yes, we did pay for the materials, but he drew up the plans, he got the permits, he did everything right. He had the skill set. And clearly we saved a lot of money and we could do a much better upgrade. It wasn't quote unquote good enough for a rental. It was really a great project. And we still have that house today, some probably 25 years later.
So are your leases, I think you mentioned annual contract, but are your leases always annual, or do you have month to month, or how do you handle that?
All of our contracts are month-to-month contracts that terminate one day a year. So we don't want people to feel they're trapped in our property. Psychologically, we want people to be there because they want to be there. And we have a motivation to keep them there through their entire contract. We agreed to hold the rents constant for a year at a time. I will tell you, our longest tenant, who was with us for 24 years and 10 months, was on a month-to-month contract the entire time. But he would get a new contract each year showing the rent for the next year. And that's worked very well for us. They're not locked into long-term. We're not locked onto the long-term. We advertise that we're in the long-term business, and we clearly are in the long-term business. But that's how we handle it. Okay.
Okay, great. Yep. We had a few more questions, but I'm going to let David go on for a few minutes and then we'll take more questions in just a few. Go ahead, David.
Okay, very good. So advertising, I'll just go through a few of these. I probably can't cover them all. Just, Larissa's going to have to tell me when I have to kind of slow down or shut up. But on the property advertising, online advertising, set it up one time on multiple sites. And we use a 24-hour rental information hotline. So they see the ad, they call our 24-hour rental information hotline that tells them what we got, where it is, how to see it, and how much. Price, change the price as you relist over the different years, and update your photos as improvements are needed upon turnover. Now, staging, let's talk about staging, because you go online and you look at properties for rent, and 9 times out of 10, every single picture is just a vacant room, and it looks like it just doesn't do much for me. I think well, let me tell you how we do it. Because we don't take a bunch of furniture around in a trailer and stage each of our houses. But what we do is when we do see our tenants over time, and we go in their houses and the place looks like $1 million, we'll tell them, your house looks terrific. And I know we want you to stay here for as long as you live, or certainly as long as I live, but you might not stay so long. And would you mind terribly if we took some pictures of your furniture, how great it looks? And we save those photos, and we save them over years with multiple different tenants. And so when we list a property, we look for the best pictures we've got them and put those pictures on. A picture of rooms with furniture in it is so much better than just vacant rooms. I'll just tell you, it's really important. So we activate the ads when needed and deactivate them when they're not needed. Tenant does post for rents yard signs with their 24-hour rental information in the house. Property showings, I pretty much covered property showings with you before, that the tenants show the properties in person or using a video walkthrough. Now let's say that we do have a vacant property, which is really very, very rare. But if we were to take on a new property, we would. And so our approach is, many folks will set up a time to show a property to someone, and then they'll call to make sure the folks are going to be there. We take a very different approach. First of all, we may set up a time to show the property, but we will let them know we will not appear to show the property unless they call us on the way to go view it. That puts the burden on them to let us know that they are physically going to be there. And then 9 times out of 10, when they give us a call, we'll say, oh my gosh, I'm on the other side of town. I can't make it. However, do you have a smartphone? And I don't think there's too many people who don't have smartphones these days. And we'll say, well, if you can take a picture of your driver's license and send it to us, we can show you how to get into the house, as long as you promise to give me a call as soon as you get out of the house and lock it all up, turn the lights off, and guarantee that everything's under control. And that really works for us. It works very, very well. We've done that for years and years. And whether you have a combination lockbox on the house, we happen to use key code keypads to open garage door openers, because all of our houses have attached garages with one exception. And those codes can be changed by the new tenant anytime they want. And it works very, very well. If I'm there when a tenant's looking through a house, they may want to negotiate. If I'm not there, they see, how does the furniture fit? How do the colors work? Does the house work? They sell themselves. It's the same situation I mentioned before, that our tenants show our properties. Well, think about this for a second. if your tenant's happy with you, is it much better for your existing tenant to convince people who are looking at the house that you're the right landlord to do business with? Or is it easier for you to tell applicants that you're a good landlord and they should do business with you? You get so much more benefit out of either physically not being at the property and having your tenant show it for you, which is our situation, as you know, over 99% of the time. So it works really, really well for us. And it also eliminates anyone coming back with a fair housing complaint saying, yeah, but you didn't accept me because of the color of my skin or something else. It has nothing to do with protected classes. We don't know who's calling on our properties. We don't know who's looking at our properties. All we see are the applications that come in. And we've told them 3 times that we're looking for the best of the best, not the first come, first serve. Application packet disbursement, the tenants hand it out. If someone goes to the house, we can email it. It's available online. Yes, you can fill out applications online. What I see happening in the fee management business these days is managers are forgetting that real estate is a people business. And so they want to do self-showings of properties. They want applications filled out online. They want contracts filled out online. And if they could give the new tenants their keys without ever seeing them, they do that. I think that's a formula for failure, because if you don't have a meeting eyeball to eyeball, belly to belly, presumably, but if not on Zoom, that's able to share expectations as to what the tenants can expect from you and what you do expect from them, how can you possibly anticipate that they're going to do what you want them to do? So I would say, yes, you want to be as efficient as you can with as many systems as you can, but that doesn't mean you don't spend time in the finality of signing a rental contract with your applicants. I think that's really, really important.
So David, if you
Sure.
don't mind, I just had a quick question for you. So you mentioned showing the property, having the tenants hand out the applications. What happens if you get an overwhelming reply to that property? Is there ever a time that you would do the applications first prior to showing so that you could maybe get that number of people that wanted to see the property down?
Yeah, I understand the question, and my son-in-law would disagree with me on this, but no, I don't. We have motivated our tenants to show the properties, and they don't know that they're going to have 150 people potentially call them.
Gotcha.
Let me give you a real world situation that happened just recently, because just before I left Florida, we were aware that one of our tenants, we were losing a tenant this year, and she was buying a house, and she was a great tenant. And on the Friday before Memorial Day, that was our rent day. And so our rents all came in, and she closed on her new house that day, but also paid June rent because she wanted some overlapping time to move and get squared away. So we ran an ad, and yes, I do get the emails in many times. You know, if you're on Zillow, folks will email you about the property, and I'd get rid of as many as I could just looking at the emails, or I'd call them back if they didn't call our hotline directly, and I'd get rid of the chaff very, very quickly. But she still would get activity on that property, and I would not contact all of them. They'd call the hotline and then call her directly. Uh, we pay a performance bonus based on how people perform after they've moved out of our properties, and there's a whole series of different things that we do. But bottom line is, we advertise that property, I believe, on the Wednesday after Memorial Day. We were inundated with activity and interest on the property that came in largely on emails, and I did get rid of as many of those as I could. And I'm trying to remember the time, by Saturday, we had accepted an applicant who had a 760 FICO score. By Sunday, we signed the rental contract. On Monday, we left Florida on our way back to Colorado Springs. And by Tuesday morning, his funds had hit my bank account by using ACH. So the system really does work. They may, folks will call us up and say, well, haven't you found one yet? I mean, because they've been inundated, and we'll say, not as good as you. And, and they don't want to stop at that point because they know that they do get this bonus. And we do take care of our tenants. We take really good care of our tenants. I paid a performance bonus to this tenant who recently, the one that moved out, and it was a couple $100, I believe, greater than her current month rent. But you look at what she did for me. She saved me from losing a month's rent. She helped me to find the right person to move in. I had very little expense, no downtime, no cost of utilities, no cost to mow lawns, do anything else, and I found the right guy in the process. So hopefully that answers the question or partially answers it.
Yes, thank you, David.
Okay, so let's see. So on the applicant screening, we do disclose that it's best qualified, not first come, first serve. We do have separate applications from everyone over the age of 18 who will live in the property. Why don't we let husband and wife fill out the same application? I'll tell you why. Information is power. More information is more power. Not every couple has been living together for 47 years the way my wife and I have. You want as much information as you can. And when you require separate applications from everyone over the age of 18, we say, well, our state laws require us to treat marrieds and singles the same. So therefore, we've got to have separate applications. And yes, it takes time to fill out our applications, but people know we're serious. They know that, we're pros. We know what the heck we're doing, and they can't put something over on us. Let me just see if I have anything else. Applications, not returned by most unqualified applicants. Lease up, I really do prefer it in person. I really do, but we have used Zoom several times in the last year, and it's worked fine. The one thing I would say is don't use the free Zoom. Why? It cuts off after 45 minutes. You want to be able to be on there for 2 hours if necessary. We really do spend time at that. For me, if I've done that right and hired the right guy and put him in, it's like I bought an annuity. I have no problem after that. The income just comes in forever, and they're good stewards. So pay the $15 for 1 month that it costs to have a paid version of Zoom that will last as long as you want it to last. Share your expectations. That time with your tenant is really the final sieve in your screening process, that if they got through everything else and they looked right, smelled right, and tasted right, but they're not right going through your contract with them, it's a great time to listen. Stand up, look them in the eyes, shake hands, and say, hey, it's not going to work. What you're trying to accomplish and we're trying to accomplish are two different things. Let's be friends. Let's shake hands, but we're not going to sign a lease. The cheapest eviction you'll ever do is to not put the wrong guy in the first place. So take that time and make sure you're not dealing with the wrong guy. Property inspections. We don't do property inspections. How do we handle it? Our new tenants moving in inspects the way the prior tenants left it moving out, and we compare the new tenant's inspection to the existing tenant's inspection he did of the prior tenant when he moved in. We have a very complete inspection report that I believe is over 10 pages. I know it took me a month to complete initially, and then our tenants have only improved upon it. There was a time my wife thought I was insane, but it has really given us consistent results over time. It's an inspection of the inside, the outside, and really it takes them several hours to fill it out, but it's well worth it. It gives us all kinds of information. In that inspection report, we give them a scavenger hunt, and the scavenger hunt makes them tell us things like, where's the main water supply line valve? So that if water's flowing in the house, they don't have to pull out their lease to find out where the water cutoff is. They know it because they've had to find it and tell us where it is. We have them do the same thing with the sprinkler system, and we require them to let us know what their filter, their furnace filter size is, which lets us know that they know how to open up the front of the furnace and take out the filter. And when in our contracts, we require them to change the filters monthly when either air conditioning or furnaces are in use, and they have to date the filters that they put in. So if we are ever in the house for any reason, or one of our vendors is, and they look, and they see the date on the filter, that lets us know whether they're following instructions and doing what they should be doing. And I can tell you, they do what they say they'll do and agree to do. But that's the system that we use for inspections. Communications to and from tenants. I send out a monthly group reminder. I don't promise to do it, and I send it out BCC as an email with any additional information that's necessary. Things like blowing out the sprinkler systems in the fall before we have a freeze, and giving them the vendors to deal with, and but also telling them that, you know, that rent will come out of their accounts the following Tuesday very early in the morning. So that if someone has a problem, they'll get a hold of Great Aunt Tilly or someone, or at least call us and tell us they have a problem. And that really helps a lot. Most landlords only talk to their tenants about negative problems. They haven't paid the rent on time. The yard looks like heck. Something's wrong. I think it's really important to give positive reinforcement. And we really try to do that. We don't do regular inspections. However, if I'm out and about and I happen to go buy a property and I see the yard looks like $1 million, I'll give them a call and I'll say, gee, I just went by your house and it looks terrific. Thank you so much. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, gee, are you here? Come on by. And I'll say, well, I just left. Well, come on back. Come, we'd like to see you. It's a different kind of an attitude. It's a different relationship with your tenants. And I can tell you, it's a lot of fun. Let's see. Yeah, we ask tenants how they want us to contact them, whether it's emails, phone calls, texting. I'm of the old school, so for me, I really want a phone call. I like belly to belly, eyeball to eyeball, number one, but phone call number two, email, I guess, three, and text the least. But we do try and meet their needs, except under warranty of habitability issues. Colorado has some real strict requirements on notification if something needs to be done to the property. And so we give them very strict instructions as to what number to call and how to follow up with an email. And that takes care of problems that if I'm on the other side of the world, how I will be able to solve problems for them. I'll have my phone forwarded to a third party, or the email will go directly to a repairman, et cetera, et cetera. I really do prefer the calls. Most of the people on this call probably won't understand this reference, but I feel like the Maytag repairman. You know, older folks may remember that Maytags used to have this ad with the repairman sitting at his desk waiting for the phone to ring because the Maytag appliances never went bad. That's my situation. Our tenants really do take care of them. Property repairs. For us, our tenants do fix the minor repairs if they have the skill set, and they contact our preferred vendors directly if they can't fix the problems. Now, how do they get those preferred vendors' names? We have a lucite picture frame mounted on the wall of our laundry rooms in each of our house, and we update that with all the names and numbers of anyone they might need to solve a problem in their house. And so if they have a problem, I say, if you call me, I just got to call them anyway. Call them directly. And we've set it up, and we know the folks on that list are honest. They're not going to gouge us. They're not going to do something they shouldn't do. And it's been a wonderful way to do business.
And do you, to that point, David, do you have a minimum that the tenant takes care of in order to avoid phone calls that might not be necessary?
I'm trying to understand exactly the question. In our contracts, our tenants are responsible for the first $75 of anything that goes wrong in a month after
Okay.
they've initially moved in and we've made sure everything works correctly, unless they've caused the problem. I'm not sure that's the question you asked me, though. So
It is. No, yep, that is correct. That's what I was wondering.
okay, and that doesn't mean they've got to throw $75 at the house each month. They don't. A house takes care of itself pretty darn well if you just maintain it. But if you run it into the ground and have to resurrect it, it gets very, very expensive. So it's a good way to handle this stuff. Now we actually do rehabs while tenants while properties are tenant occupied, and we've done some very dramatic rehabs. The first thing to do is to sell the tenants that it's their idea and that they'd like us to do it. we might go in and say, well, you've been here for a number of years and we really appreciate your business. If Santa Claus came today, what would you really like to have done to this house? And sometimes people would say, well, we'd love some new windows. The windows are old. The house is 30 years old. It's time. And we'll jump. We'll solve, put the windows in. But I can tell you right now, we've wiped out kitchens, knocked out walls. We've had people without kitchens for 6 weeks while we're doing all of this. And they've paid rent the entire time. They thanked us for doing it. And let's face it, when the rehab's done, it gives us a justification for a rent increase. And if they move, it looks that much better for the next person moving in. But there are other things involved too. All of our materials are protected while the rehab's going on. And the tenants are very appreciative that we're willing to do that kind of stuff for them. It really gives them an incentive to stay long term. I have a number of tenants now who've shared with me that they want to stay in our houses for life. Now, whether that will really happen or not, how the heck do I know? But I do know I leased a house last year to a tenant who came from Texas, and they're homeowners in Texas, and they're actually landlords also. And they rented their house in Texas to move up to Colorado because their son was involved in some hockey league special training that was based in out of this area. And so they rented my house, and they've since decided they're going to sell their house in Texas. They're not going to move from my house. They love my house. They want to stay there forever. And they want to take the cash from selling their house in Texas and buy rental property and do what we do. And I thought that was pretty interesting. In fact, our last seminar that we put on, which was a Zoom seminar, one of our current tenants took our seminar from us, which I found fascinating. They also were homeowners. They're still tenants of ours and wonderful, wonderful people. But I was really curious to know what they think when they saw the curtain drawn back and saw how we operated our business. They liked it. And I think they'll buy some more properties too. So we do the rehabs, rent collection. I mentioned ACH. We pull, the tenants don't push. We do the transaction. And if I owe the tenants money for something, I had a tenant call me this morning and tell me he had a problem with the microwave. And he asked me, he said he wanted to buy a new one and he wanted to upgrade it to stainless to match. I said, do it, send me the bill and I'll pay you our portion. So, we can send money to their bank account. Vendor payments. How do we pay our vendors? Well, I do pay them ACH. With me being in Florida, it's wonderful. They can email me a bill and I can turn around and ACH the money into their bank account. It will be there the next day. That's a very efficient way to do business. No cost of postage. I don't have to put on my shoes and go to the post office. And it's reliable, whereas the post office is not reliable. If we can, obviously, we'll use credit cards. Why? I want to collect points for mileage or something else. And we do some checks, but very, very few checks. I actually have an essential trimmer, so I can hardly write my name anymore. But these other things are so much more efficient. And that's what you're looking at. You're looking at how can you plan your business that makes sense from an efficiency standpoint.
Now, on those vendor payments, David, I had a question pop up. Do you have an amount that the vendor has to check in with you on before doing the repair, or how does that work? Or do they alert you when the bill is, of course, going to be more than $75?
Yeah, on my preferred vendors, I'll stand behind them. I know them. I've known them for years. I trust them. You really want to put together a team. A number of people think that, well, Tilney lives in Naples, Florida, and he runs his properties in Colorado Springs. That means he could live anywhere and run properties anywhere. That's not true. That's really not true. I can run my properties in Colorado Springs from Naples much better than I could ever run properties in Naples from Naples. The reason for that is I've got my networks. I've got honest people. I've got people who will do what they say they'll do when they say they'll do it. And I think that's really important. Everyone always thinks the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. They can buy properties that cost a ton less and they can get higher returns. But there are all kinds of unknowns. And I would say become an expert where you are or one place that you can put things together. I really don't have limitations. Now, when I'm doing some special project, for example, we did have on a house that was built in 1949, we did have a block up the other day on the sewer line, and we needed to put in a double clean out. We actually needed to put on two, and that needed to be hand dug, and that was fairly expensive. And so clearly, before we did the work, I got a bid on that, and we also got a video of our sewer line. So there's always exceptions to situations, but on our general repairs problems that come up, our guys don't have to call me. If they ever take advantage of me, they'll be off the list. I'll put someone else on. So there's the whole idea of trust. Trust is really, you want trust with your tenants, you want it with your vendors, and you need to be trustworthy. That's the key way you're ever going to gain the trust of the other folks. It's got to start with you. Okay.
Okay, great, great. Thank you for that. Um, I see that we're right at 1 o'clock, so we'll go to the next slide. I don't see too many other questions, so what we're going to do is have David quickly run through these so that we can wrap up in case we have anybody that has to leave. Now, certainly if you don't have to leave, stay on. If you do, we'll get this content to you in the form of a recording. I don't believe we have too many more slides. Let me just check that here. Nope, this is the last slide. So we'll have David run through it. If you have any questions, we'll try to take them again at the end. But we'll start with bookkeeping and reports.
Well, I think the only thing I want to point out on bookkeeping and reports is you can either use virtual assistants, you can use vertical software. What is vertical software? If you have a bunch of properties, vertical software will do both the accounting portion and the tenant database portion. Who owes what, who's paid what, maintenance and repairs and those kinds of things. And there's any number of different companies out there that you can use for doing that. There's companies like Propertyware, Yardy Breeze, Buildium, Appfolio, Promise. And in fact, if you're a small owner, meaning you have less than 10 properties, Promise is a program that actually runs on your computer. Most of these other ones are cloud-based. You might write this down or you'll have it in the recording. Promise has a demo version that usually comes with sample data, but they will give it to you without sample data if you contact Kathy Flood, or at least she told me that was the case in 2018 when I met her. She's the director of sales, and her email is sales@promise.com. That's PROMAS.com. Her phone number is 703-255-1400. And what I'm saying is that if you got their demo version without any properties and tenants in it, it is a live version and will work at no charge for 10 properties. And that's not bad to be able to check it out. Let's see, rent renewals and increases. We've pretty much covered that one already. Ours all renew July or August of some year. If people move out mid-year, because ours are month to month and they can do that. People move when they've got to move, let's face it. And with that in mind, then the new person that moves in will either go a short first year through to, let's say, July, or a long year plus through June of the following year. Hopefully that makes sense. Why do we make them do then? For us in Colorado, that's we have the largest group of applicants looking for rentals. There's no snow on the ground. There's no kids in school. That's when people are moving. That's when we get the highest rents. Different parts of the country, it may be very, very different. For example, in Florida, you may want to do it in January when the snowbirds come down and there's a real demand for rentals. So know your market and figure it out. I think previously someone asked me about how we set our rents when we increase them. And I'm not sure, I didn't answer that, I don't think. So let me just quickly do so. Every year we clock our properties to the market. We determine what we think the range of rents are for our property. But then we also look at looking at our tenant in the property to the ideal tenant. And obviously we take better care of those folks that we really do think are good stewards and they're good people to do business with. Folks that we wouldn't mind if they moved on, we might raise the rent above market rate, and they'll either pay for their sins or maybe they'll move on. And so either way, we'll do just fine. Rent renewal, okay, I covered that. Evictions, I don't know anything about evictions. The only eviction I ever did was in 1981. And so I just have to be honest. If I had to handle an eviction, I'd have to call a friend, another manager, call the attorney, and find out the current procedures, because they're changing daily as laws from the West Coast are coming across the country and just making it very, very difficult to be a landlord. And so be aware of those laws, and you know, be a member of RIA groups and raise Cain when things are put forth as changed laws, and see if you can slow it down, because they're changing very, very quickly. Travel and vacation, the key thing is to, you know, when I started, I had two other friends that I met with as we needed for breakfast. Someone would call a meeting, and one of us, one guy did 500 plus tax returns a year and owned rental property. And another one was really good at maintenance coordination. He had a little pickup truck. He drove around town. He knew all the right guys to do stuff. And I was kind of the paralegal guy who could put the contracts together. And I can tell you that one person has so much brain power to figure stuff out, but you add another and it doesn't go up twice as much. It's exponential. And so if you can have financial friends, friends that you can, that you don't compete with, you cooperate with, you share vendors, you do the things you need to do. And so I took my wife and kids around the world one summer. And when I did that, I went to one of my friends and said, tag Vern, you're it. Watch my stuff while we take off. And money doesn't have to transfer hands. You take care of your friends, they solve your problems, you solve their problems. And it works very well. I will tell you just a really quick story that might be of interest. When we were on the other side of the world in Bali, someone was moving out of a house up the street from one of my houses, and they didn't set the parking brake on the truck, and the truck rolled down the hill and wiped out a wall of a garage of my house. And the tenants weren't there, and the tenants came home, and the wife didn't speak any English, husband did, and the fire department's there, and the police are there, and they wondered who to call. So they got out the rental contract, and it told them who to call for taking care of a problem. And they called the handyman, and the handyman came out and secured the property. They got the insurance from the automobile, the folks whose truck rolled down the hill, and that insurance company repaired the whole thing. We came back to Colorado Springs, it was done. We were totally out of it. That's an efficient way to run your business when things happen and you don't need to be there. That's pretty much my talk. I'm open to questions, if time.
Okay, we did have one question pop up here. If the market fluctuates downward, would you adjust rents downward?
What really happens is when my existing tenants, I don't, and I may raise them $5. I'll raise them just a little tiny bit, because remember, I'm in the house business, and most people around my house, I don't have people living on tops of each other and the sides of each other. They don't know what the market rents are if they're happy with me. And it costs people to move. So I will move them, I will adjust them upwards slightly. Now, if someone moves out, I have to start at where we were with that tenant for let's say the first week. And then I'll call them up and say, oh my gosh, I guess I was wrong. The market's different. We have to make an adjustment down to make you, to solve the problem, and so that you can earn a performance bonus. And again, we work as a team. So yes, I will adjust down if I need to get a new tenant. With an existing tenant, no, I will not. When I had fourplexes, that was a problem. A new tenant would move in at a lower rent than an existing tenant who was already there. That's a problem. It's not a problem with single family houses that are surrounded by owner occupied houses.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. I'm going to give everybody just a minute to type in any last minute questions that you have while I do some reminders for you. Reminder that you can download the handout. It is in the handout section of your control panel for the webinar, so you'll get the PDF of the slides available to you there. I will also remind you that this is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to you in just a day. It usually takes, so look at that for your inbox. Check your spam folder if you don't see it. A lot of times it will end up there because of the link. I also want to remind everybody that David's class is one of the last weekends in September, the 24th to the 26th. It is an online class. You can register at davidtilney.com. You can also contact David. He's been so kind as to share his contact information. So you have any additional questions, you can reach him at that phone number and also that email address with any questions. And I think that that is all we have today. I don't see any other questions pop up. I just want to remind everybody that we have classes every week. They're always no cost, no obligation. And we also have our own networking events. So if you guys are doing Zoom networking and you want to join Advanta IRA for our networking event, it is every other Friday. The next one, just because of the July 4th holiday, is set for July 8th. So that is, or excuse me, July 9th. So we kind of finagled the weeks a little bit just because of the July 4th holiday, but please join us on July 9th. You can go to advantaira.com/events and look for Pitch, Promote, and Prosper. That is our Zoom meeting. Everybody has the opportunity to talk deals, share contact information, talk about services they provide on our Pitch, Promote, and Prosper networking events, and they are a lot of fun. We have anywhere from 50 to 100 people online every other week, just depending on the week, and those are not recorded. So if you want information on investments that are discussed during that meeting, you do have to be online. That's a compliance requirement. So again, advantaira.com/events. And one more I will mention, I have Bill Tan joining me on July 7th to talk about wrap loans. So that's another great webinar we have coming up. And I want to thank you so much, David, for joining us. That was a great discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Larissa. Always enjoy it. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, absolutely. Take care and thank you, everybody. We're going to close it out now. And like I said, you will get the recording in just about a day. Take care. Bye-bye.